Hello, welcome to today's event, which is the third virtual event for Rocky Mountain ISA, or otherwise known as Denver ISSA now. My name is Teresa DeGroat. I'm the Director of Membership for Denver ISSA, and we are very happy to have you guys spend time with us because we have taken all of the wonderful content that was created for the Rocky Mountain Information Security Conference, and we've turned it into virtual events. We are on the third event. There are going to be somewhere between 13 and 14 events in all. So we would very much like to see you come and enjoy this fantastic security content over the next couple of months. You can tell what's upcoming by going to the Denver ISSA events page and also to be on the email list. If you have questions, I encourage you to get into the Denver ISSA Slack channel. We'll be able to then pull that information into the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker today, which is Steve Winterfeld. Steve is the advisory CISO for Akamai. And in that role, he is focused on being the voice of the customer for Akamai's security vision and also helping CISOs solve their most pressing issues. His experience comes from zero trust security architectures. He's integrated multiple tools into programs that will stand up to both auditors and hackers. Before joining Akamai, he served as the Director of Incident Response and Threat Intelligence at Charles Schwab, the Director of Cybersecurity for Nordstrom, and CISO for Nordstrom Bank. He has also supported multiple DoD and government agencies while at Northrop Grumman. So Steve also has shared with us that his hobby is disc golfing, which he has had plenty of opportunities to practice recently. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Steve Winterfeld. And Steve, take it away from here.
Thanks. Thank you very much. As you can see, I've shortened the title up so it fit on the slide a little easier. And really what I want to talk today is about the business models that the cyber criminals have developed. It's always fascinated me to see the innovation that they come up with to continue to make money off of attacking legitimate businesses. For a little bit of fun, when I was up in Alaska, going in and out of airports, because you're always flying when you're in Alaska, you can see the security at the airport there in that picture. The security code is right next to the keypad. And so while we complain about our security, it's a security problem in just about every sector we look at. So with that, let's just kind of jump into this. There is a cybercrime larger economy here that it's really can be measured in trillions of dollars. There are enough cyber criminal activities that it is now more profitable than the illegal drug trade. If it were a country, it'd be the 13th highest gross national product in the world. And it is an economy that's been hit by the COVID crisis. We see that in a recent Krebs report that all the social distancing and lockdowns are impacting the money mules. And so we'll talk a little bit more about what that is in a minute. But as far as the profit being made, haven't really seen a change in what people are paying for the kind of materials that they're trading, be it credit card numbers or identities or credentials or things like that. Haven't seen a lot of price changes in the economy today. This economy continues to grow. The Akamai puts out a State of the Internet report, and we see that the number of credential abuse attacks continues to grow annually. But we've also noticed that a lot of this is following where we're going. So as companies move from their primary website to machine interaction on API, the criminals have started to attack the APIs. Just like when we move to the cloud or any other infrastructure, the criminals move where the money is. And lastly, I want to highlight, if you're interested in this, there are a number of national reports. The one I like comes out of Europol, which is a report that talks about the larger economy going on. It highlights cyber-dependent crimes, and those are crimes that computers have to be used to facilitate, as well as, fraud and exploitation and terrorism. It's a good overall view of some of the activities that are going on across the broader spectrum. One of the challenges we always have in cyber is there is no governing body that tells us what the definitions are. And as I go through today, I'll cover probably about 25 different techniques or business models that I've collected just by keeping track of the ones I see. But it's interesting that what is considered cybercrime or fraud. I will say that fraud is a criminal activity that has deception as part of its execution, where cybercrime is anything where it's breaking a law. And one of the challenges we have here is laws are tied to geography, and cybercrime operates independent from that geography. So what is a cybercrime depends on where you're sitting and potentially where the attack came from. The other thing I find interesting is in larger companies, you'll see that information security owns cybercrime, but fraud is owned by a different part of the company. Typically, what I see is information security is focused on protecting the company and the infrastructure and the employees, whereas fraud is focused on protecting the actual customers and making sure that they're not impacted. Another area that's interesting is we talk about a business model versus an attack method. So stealing credit cards may be your business model. How you steal them, a recent technique that's gained popularity is going out into the JavaScript environment for a company and say, for instance, a retailer doesn't want to handle credit cards because they don't want to have to deal with the PCI compliance issues. So when you're shopping there, the JavaScript environment has the credit cards going to a third party, and they handle all that for you. Well, if somebody gets into that JavaScript environment and hijacks that or skims that, then they're stealing that PCI data. A popular group that's doing that now is MageCart. So the method by which they steal the credit card, and there are a number of them, that's just one example, is different than what they're actually stealing and monetizing. A little bit, we'll talk a lot about account takeovers is very popular versus identity theft. An account takeover would be if I shop, so right now I'm shopping a lot at Amazon. So if I were to go in and take over somebody's Amazon account, I can purchase items through that account directly versus somebody comes in and takes over my identity as Steve Winterfeld, then uses that information to go open accounts, get a new credit card, open accounts in different stores, and use my identity as a business model to create accounts to then go spend them. The last thing we'll touch on is a mule. A mule is anywhere you have a person in your business process that has to take some action. So for instance, if we're talking about money laundering and the technique you were going to use to change from currency into actual money was to have all of that come out of ATMs. You would need people to go to the ATMs, pick that money up, and then either spend it in the way you felt appropriate or put it in a bank account you designated, something of that nature. You may use that an account you took over to have a physical good sent to somebody, and that mule would then repackage it and send it over to C's or to wherever you were sending it to monetize it again. And so these are just some common definitions we'll use as we go through this today. So let's jump into the ecosystem itself. So if I'm an entrepreneur looking to develop some cyber criminal business, the first thing I want to do is figure out what my business model is going to be. And really one of the challenges is, how do I scale that business model through automation or some means to grow the business? I need to decide if I'm going to specialize or be self-sufficient. So as we look at an oversimplified, and most of my examples today will be oversimplified, process, I need to steal some data that can be monetized. Then once I steal that, I can sell that data. So if I steal an account, I can sell that account information to somebody else. That third party would then go in, access the account, and purchase gift cards. Those virtual gift cards, then they would turn and sell those gift cards on the dark web. Then another party would use those to cash out, buy products, and have the money mules send those products over to them overseas. And so this is an ecosystem where you're having different people specialize in different functions. Or I can take all of those actions myself and be a self-sufficient business. So some examples of businesses I can go into, I can sell a tool, an all-in-one tool. There's a great write-up in Akamai's SOTI report on this tool. Is a tool that allows somebody to go in and set up their own cyber crime business. So I can sell a tool, or I can offer a service. For instance, I can have a call center with people in it. And for instance, if somebody was going in and automating an attack, but then they got to a CAPTCHA page, they would port that CAPTCHA page over to the call center. A human would then go in and identify which of the pictures had a traffic light in them, and then port it back over to the automated process. And so I could offer that as a service. If I'm doing this, I have to make a decision on marketing. How am I going to sell my product? How am I on the dark web going to attract customers? I want to make sure that I have a good reputation, because obviously you want to steal your illegal credit cards from a reputable source. So then I have to figure out what my SLAs are. What is my service agreements going to be? Am I going to offer refunds? It is like any other business. If I'm providing that service, then I have to have return customers. A little bit about how I want to build my business. I can focus on the very technical and build malware, or I can focus on attacking people, or the wetware, and social engineering. And there's some hybrid here. I may need a social engineering phishing attack to launch my ransomware. So there may be a hybrid there of what I'm doing. Or I can focus just on social engineering for something like wire fraud. So there's a variety there of what I need to do. I then again want to figure out, what is my target audience? Where is my market? Do I want to focus on retail? Do I want to focus on finance? Is there a specific sector that I want to tailor my attacks to? And then is there a region? For instance, do I want to focus on Europe or America? Or do I want to stay out of areas where I physically live, so I'm less likely to be arrested? If I am focused on a region, there may be a reason for that, because I've got different security controls required in different regions. Banking in Europe online requires two-factor authentication. Banking in the United States may not. And so if I'm targeting banks, I may want to target banks in an area that doesn't require security controls that make it more difficult for me to execute my business process. And so this is a little bit about some of the decisions I have to make as I decide what business model I want to go into. And not necessarily directly related to cybercrime, but at a larger picture is my motivations will also determine my business model. So if I'm a hobbyist, and I think in my book on cyber warfare, I called them script kiddies, but I'm just somebody that's doing this without a profit motive or a specific objective, then I'm going to be all over the board in what I do. If I'm a hacktivist, I'm going to concentrate on compromising information, stealing data, but data that may not be financially sensitive. So I may be fine attacking email accounts. And extracting emails will allow me to have the impact against the organization by disclosing their activities. So it's very politically motivated. Criminals should typically be focused on financial motivations. Non-nation state, and an example here is terrorism, could be focused on actions that will, again, achieve a political end through intimidation. So it may be something more like attacking critical infrastructure like SCADA, water, power, things of that nature. And then finally, nation state attacks. There's really two here. It could be focused on espionage, stealing information, and which I may never make public. If I've stolen information, it's going to help me make decisions, and you'll never know I stole it. And then all the way up to cyber war, which is a subject in and of itself, but the motivations there would include, pre-staging exploits to be executed at a later date. How do I build the process for my business? And really, here you see abbreviated and slightly tailored version of the Cyberkill chain. But the Cyberkill chain is a great template for me to build this on. I'm going to have to go gather data. Once I understand what defenses the target has, I will tailor an exploit to compromise what I'm going after. After I have that exploit ready, I will deliver it. Once it hits, it's going to exploit. The exploit means it could compromise confidentiality. I could extract data from the company. It could compromise availability. It could be something like a ransomware attack that prevents them from operating until they pay me. Or I could compromise integrity. We don't see a lot of this today, but it could be anything from changing the information about the product or the capabilities or my account. A simple example would be going in and changing the amount of money I had on my gift card program. So next we'll jump into an example of just kind of the evolution that you can see based on what people are going after. So the first thing that was easy to go after and monetize were the payment method, primarily credit cards. You would see other things like debit cards and some e-wallets and things like that, but primarily going after credit cards. And so the industry took more and more actions to protect credit cards, and that got more difficult. So then they would steal the personally identifiable information, the PII, and by stealing that, they could create accounts and go after identity theft. And so there were more protections put around PII. And so then they pivoted to stealing gift cards because they were unprotected. And as companies started to lose money on the gift cards that were stolen and protect them similar to they did with the credit cards, then they switched over to the loyalty points or programs and started to steal those. And again, companies had to start protecting those the same they would their credit cards. And so you just constantly see the innovation as they're figuring out what's not protected that they could turn into an income stream, and then they'll pursue that. And so again, this is an evolution within a classic retail kind of chain that you would potentially see. So now we're going to start jumping into the actual business models themselves. So the first and probably one of the easiest is going after identity. And different parts of your identity are worth different amounts of money on the dark web. So your name, your social security number, your current address, your phone number, fairly easy to get a hold of, not necessarily worth a lot of money. Something like your driver's license, a little harder to get a hold of, worth a little bit more money. And so there is a range of value here. And there's also, the more information you have, the better package you can provide somebody, the more value. The next thing you might want to go after is a credit card. And so interestingly enough, a credit card has a few challenges as you think through this. So once the credit card theft is discovered, your source of income is probably going to be cut off. So if you break into a major retailer and you're siphoning credit card information, we'll pick an attack method right off the point of sale device. So you have like black POS and it's siphoning those credit card numbers. As soon as it's discovered, then they're going to go in, forensically look around, figure out where they're leaking that information, and they're going to patch it. And so your revenue stream is going to be cut off. So you have to balance how much of that credit card information do you want to start selling? Do you want to hoard a lot of it and then start selling it? And then it becomes a bit of a fire sale, because once it becomes publicly known, then there's going to be discovery method, and they're going to know which credit cards were compromised. They're going to start notifying those credit card companies, and those cards will become deactivated. And so as you think through this business model, you have some decisions to make. If you were to break into a smaller regional restaurant company, it may take longer to correlate where these credit cards are being used because there's not a big database. And so you may be able to stream those real time, selling smaller batches and not be as worried about compromising your point of sale. Another area, gift cards, reward points, very similar. The different models depends on which industry you're in. If you have a gift card for a retail, then how do you convert that to cash? What's the simplest way? And you may look at their return policy. And so if you buy something with a gift card, can you return it and get cash? And those business models then require the fraud team at the retail organization to make a determine, do they want to change their policy? Reward points, again, can you convert those into different means? Can you buy something with them that's electronic? So again, with a rewards point, if I can go in and buy something and I buy an electronic gift card, that's easier because I may not need a money mule. If I go in and use my reward points to buy an item, then having that item shipped to someplace besides the address on that account becomes problematic, especially if you're shipping it overseas. So you would ship it, go in and change account information to be the physical address of your mule, have the item shipped to the mule, or say it's a gift, and then have the mule ship or sell that or try to take it for an exchange. Another area that's interesting is the automated bot purchase of a high demand item. So if there is a concert coming up and the concert's going to sell out really quick, or if there's an event coming up like SMooCons, the SMooCon tickets sell out very fast. And so you want a bot to go in and buy as many of those as possible, and then you can resell that ticket at a markup price, at a scalped price. Right now in Europe, you're seeing bots attack home food delivery services. And so it's getting, there's experience where people are having trouble getting home delivery because the bots are going in and picking up those slots. Or if you have a new tennis shoe coming out, you can buy those original shoes at cost, but sell them at an extreme markup. So if you have some automated system going up and snapping up all those shoes, it's a quick way to make some money. Coupon abuse is the same thing you would see in the real world. And to be honest, most of the things you're seeing in here are replicated in the real world. It's the same kind of fraud that could happen without cyber. The click fraud is something unique to cyber. We'll talk about that in a second. But coupon abuse is the same kind of things you would see with physical coupons. People printing up fake coupons, trying to get change the amount on the coupon and get that to be accepted, using multiple coupons. I haven't seen this as much online. So I would categorize this as more hypothetical than common right now. Click fraud is an interesting challenge. So right now, if I were to sell cars, so I'm selling my brand of cars, and I'm going to pay Google $5 every time somebody Google's buy a new car. My ad will be the top one there. So if they're going to click on my ad, I'll have the most likely ad to click on. They'll come look at my cars. And so I have $5 million set aside to pay for all these advertisements. If we have somebody come along and say, I'm going to pay $3 to advertise their car, but it's lower, less likely to get clicked on, then what they can do is pay somebody to go in and click on my ad 1 million times. My $5 million budget is spent. I'm no longer advertising on the site. And now they're paying $3 for that top site. So again, an oversimplified example of click fraud, but something that you see is a little bit more common. Our second set, taking a slightly different look now, we're talking about different types of attacks here. Is there a question?
Yes. Thank you, Steve. So a talking point from someone is, what if you had the item shipped to the victim and then steal it off the porch immediately after it's been delivered? So it'd be less risky from the detection piece of it. Is this something that, potentially could be happening?
So certainly one of the things that you're trying to do is avoid being detected as having taken over the account. And so if I take over an account, some of the things I might do is I might change the phone number. So if they call to ask me a question about the account, they're calling me, not the owner. I may change the shipping address so things would be shipped to me. I may change the email address. But if I change too many of those, I'm likely to be detected because the fraud teams are looking for those kind of changes. So if you have somebody with a very sophisticated fraud, you may be able to have it shipped to the individual, and part of it would be, are you going to be notified when it's going to be delivered? If you can either hijack the email notification or the text notifications, then that might be practical to say, I know it's going to be delivered this afternoon. I can go by. There are some geographical limitations on that, so it wouldn't scale as well, because either you would have to just do it for yourself, which if you're more of a hobbyist, that would work fine. But if you're trying to do it at scale, you would need to have money mules in the same zip codes as the victims. Excellent question. Thank you, though. And that's the kind of innovation that I really admire, is people trying to think of how to continually make sure everybody, all of us in cybersecurity, have a job, because we're fairly secure that this is going to continue. Account takeovers are pretty straightforward. You can do this through social engineering, calling the call center and trying to convince them that you forgot your password and to let you reset your password through social engineering. Or a typical method is something we call credential stuffing. We have a lot of people reusing passwords. You know, typical person today probably has somewhere between 25 and 50 passwords across all of their different accounts. And so if you say, well, I'm going to use the same account, or I'm going to use the same password on all my accounts, and yes, that is my parents, then if one of them is stolen, so somebody breaks in and steals their credentials from their streaming media account, then they have access to their banking account. And so trying to convince people that they don't want to share that risk across it is difficult, and you see a lot of successful credential stuffing. So I buy this set of username and passwords, and I just blast those against the retailer I'm interested in. So if I send 1 million of those, maybe 5,000 of them work. And so I've now broken into 5,000 accounts for this retail. And once I take it over, we just talked about some of the things I want to do once I take it over. And then I can either use that, or I can sell that account to somebody else and they can take action on it. Typically, there are a lot of defenses against this. There are a lot of fraud techniques against this. So to do this at scale in a repeatable fashion takes some effort. The next is credential theft. The most common technique you probably see here is phishing. Right now, the most common subject is something around COVID. So you want to have someone say, listen, we have everybody remote working. Because of this, we're having everybody reset their passwords just for extra security right now. Please go to this unique site and reset your password. Maybe you have 5% of the employees, maybe 50% of the employees go and reset their credentials. The first thing you have to do to reset their credentials is put in their current credentials. Once they put in their current credentials, there's a message come out. Actually, your password is strong enough. You don't need to reset yours. Continue to use your password. And unless they happen to mention it to somebody in security, now their credentials are compromised. This would be credential theft, specifically targeted gaining access to a company. There are any ways to break into a company, a retailer, and steal all their credentials would be harvesting large sets of them. And we'll talk about this a little bit later with Zoom, but there are all sorts of interesting challenges here, and it's hard to secure against. And I'm slipping into protecting, which I really want to share my passion for just understanding the innovation of the cyber economy. But this is risk accepted by your customers. Wire fraud or business email compromise. This is largely social engineering. So this is the classic example of an email from the faking to be from the CEO saying, hey, I've decided to buy another company. This is a merger and acquisition. It's extremely confidential. You cannot talk to anybody in the company about it. I need you to cut a check for $5 million and send it to this account and simply acknowledge to me in this email when it's done. And I will go and confirm with the CEO of the company that I'm purchasing that he has it. And again, this is, privileged information. Don't talk to anybody about this activity. Once that money goes out, it will be a while until it was discovered, and sometime, again, how effective I am at money laundering, whether or not you'll be able to get that money back. But this is an active technique, and if you Google this, you'll see 3 or 4 cases where there's huge impact to companies almost all the time. This next one is warranty fraud, similar to coupon fraud. I've seen write-ups on it. I haven't seen a lot of practice on it. But if I go and buy some item, let's say I just bought a new refrigerator, did I turn in the warranty for it? Maybe, maybe not. If I didn't, somebody can go turn in the warranty for me. They can then claim the warranty and have a new refrigerator sent to them. And then the first I know about it is when the company calls me and says, hey, we need the old refrigerator back. So you can see a lot of variations of this, but just another area where there's a potential to monetize and very few security controls around it today. Next, I want to talk about the cell phone we use. The cell phone was never designed to be a security device. We more and more are using it as a security device. We're getting text with security code numbers. We're loading applications on it to do two-factor authentication. And the phone companies have been very clear that they're not providing a secure device. And they're not putting more energy into making it secure because they don't want to necessarily be liable for it. And so, again, I'm seeing this more in Europe where they're compromising the phone as part of the process of taking over a bank account. So if they know there's going to be two-factor authentication, they call the phone company, they get the SIM card changed out. Then when they take over the bank card, the code, the two-factor authentication code, is coming to the compromised phone. And so this is both a business model and part of a business process. Another area we see is very popular right now. A lot of gaming going on, a lot of streaming video going on. There are a couple things within gaming. The first is around stealing your asset. If you spend a lot of time and money and effort getting the magic sword that's going to allow you to make it to the next level in your game, then somebody comes in and steals that. They can sell that on, either in the game or on eBay or something like that. So there is active theft within the gaming. And then there's also account theft. Not as much in gaming as in streaming content, but there is some account takeover challenges. The next is streaming. We see somebody coming in and taking over your account. You may not notice it because you can still access it, but they may then turn around and sell your password for other people to use, or they may put you in violation by actually stealing the streaming and rebroadcasting it, and they're committing that crime on your account. And so there are a couple areas here where you may lose access to your account because of fraudulent activity occurring on it. So if I have a news site or some site where I'm selling my content, and somebody's coming in and taking that content and offering it on their site, that's another area. And all of this piracy is going on all the time. And so that, how do you protect against that content theft? And somebody can be porting that over directly for their use or reselling it, and the person purchasing it isn't aware that it's stolen content. Botnet. So now a botnet is a set of computer systems. They may be IoT devices. Again, bringing my mom into the fray. My mom calls and says, hey, the internet doesn't work. And most of us in this call are our family's IT department, so I'm sure there's a lot of empathy right now. And so I'm trying to figure out what she means when she says this, and finally figure out that her machine is going so slow because she's decided to participate in a botnet. And so her compromised machine is spending most of its computing power as a botnet. And so it can be done in many models. And I talked about this earlier in that all-in-one reference, but I can use that botnet. I can offer it for sale as a service, and you can do denial of service with it. You can do credential stuffing with it. You can do that buying the latest tennis shoes, that kind of gray marketing fraud. And so I can offer a botnet as a service. Zoom bombing, this is interesting because I've seen articles on how much Zoom credentials are being sold for. I don't necessarily understand what people are doing financially with that information. The harassment part for Zoom bombing makes sense. The buying Zoom credentials for other than harassment, I'd be curious if anybody's figured that one out, because to date I really don't understand if there is a financial motive once someone is buying those credentials. Another set we'll talk about here is insider trading. There's a pretty interesting book, Kingdom of Lies, that gave some insight into this. But this is if you can break into the communication system of a financial organization and find out what they're going to be announcing that will impact their stock, then you can make stock purchases based on insider trading information before it's public. And so another one is email account compromise. You see this for the hacktivist a lot, but you can also see this as a way to do intelligence, competitive intelligence against another company. And so if I'm going out and buying information about my competitors, I may not be aware that the way that the service I'm buying this from is actually, doing something illegal, like breaking into the competition I want research done on into their email accounts. And so this kind of gets into this buyer beware conundrum. Selling illegal items. Wired did a great write-up, and there's actually a couple books out about Silk Road, one of the first ones to do this, but there are entire markets for selling items. And these are, stolen credentials, drugs, all sorts of criminal activity. But this is another business model where I can provide the marketplace. Classic extortion and blackmail. The two extremes I'll talk about are, doing a denial of service attack against a company and then saying, if you pay me $50,000, I'll ensure that the person that did that denial of service attack doesn't do it again. That protection money, we used to call it, when the mafia would come around. And so the other extreme is kind of where you get this email that has some information that is yours, some of your PII or some credentials of yours that have been stolen in the past, or some information like that, and says, we have pictures of you watching porn. And if you don't pay this amount, we're going to publish these pictures to everybody you know. So different kinds of extortion and blackmail techniques out there. There's a whole slew of these. Another area I think is interesting is if you're running a call center and somebody comes in and you can leave a message to be called back, and there are phone scams that when you call them back, that you're charged a fee, kind of the 1-800 fees. Another phone scam, not necessarily cyber-based, is a zero or ring, where somebody rings, you pick up, nobody's there, you call back. Well, when you call back, you're charged a fee for calling that toll number. And so there are a lot of phone scams, but the one you want to do is you want to automate this by having auto dialer calling call centers and leaving a callback number, and then you can operate at scale. Every time around tax season comes, people will turn in a fake tax return online and claim a refund. And so by fraudulently claiming that refund and having it shipped to them, then when you go to file your taxes, you find someone's already filed them, and now you're trying to prove you're not the one that claimed the fraudulent refund. Cryptocurrency, as I said, looked at Bitcoin. Bitcoin took a bit of a dip right around the start of the lockdown, but it's climbed back to its previous numbers. Cryptocurrency is probably the currency of the cybercrime community. You see people using it to do money laundering. You'll see people doing it to stealing resources to mine cryptocurrency. And finally, you'll see a number of cryptocurrencies that have been broken in where people are basically, doing bank robbery and stealing money from the cryptocurrency providers. The last one on models we'll talk about, health insurance fraud, goes back to stealing your PII information and saying, I will sell you this health insurance information for you to go in and have a baby on. And then when you leave the hospital, find out that I get a bill at my house because he stole my health insurance for having a baby. Again, an oversimplified example, but some of the things you can do with stolen health information. Online spam, selling fake or real meds online across regulatory boundaries between states, between nations. This one is interesting. You can build your business model on an at-risk population. So you can go out and figure out if you want to target elderly people. You can go buy that information legitimately through aggregators, or you can go in and buy that on the dark web and target specific communities. The other area here, as far as targeting, and I don't know if I should have put it under at risk, is open banking. You see this more in Europe, but this is where you're able to access your bank through third-party applications. And so it's just an area where we're going to see more innovation and more business models. And I put it here because recently dealing with elderly in my family, when they get into these third-party apps that aren't necessarily going to the bank, again, it's easier to do fraud because it's easier to convince them to do things on these applications than it would be for something they understand more traditionally. The last one is location tracking. There are a lot of things to do when you can track someone's location. The easiest is to know when they're out of town, and then you can target robbing their house. Again, number of different techniques. So I've tried to keep these to different business models. I want to turn the table now and talk about some of the methods we use to execute these models. So the first is, are you going to have a manual or an automated attack? Are you going to physically have to conduct the attack? Or are you going to be able to script it and let it run on its own? Do you want to focus on attacking the people, or do you want to attack the actual hardware, the infrastructure? And so typically, if you focus on social engineering, you're going after getting a human to take some action to allow you to execute your compromise. Do you want to do very malware specific? And this is even if you're doing social engineering, at some point you'll probably need malware, and the one below it is an example of malware, something like a ransomware to execute that exploit phase of your business model. Do you want to attack the infrastructure? If right now with so many people working remote, if you attacked VPN, you would be doing a denial of service. You could use this in a business model like exploit or blackmailing somebody. Or do you want to go after the clickjacking, and we talked about this at the beginning, to go after credit cards by going after their infrastructure and their Java environment? And finally, do you want to deny access through some kind of denial of service attack using either IoT devices or compromised systems to take people offline? A few methods more focused on the finance community. Credential stuffing, we talked about this earlier, where people reuse their accounts. It's a popular method to do credential stuffing, to accomplish it, to account takeover. And really the two top are probably today a retailer or a financial institution. You can also do manual account takeover. A lot of the systems designed to detect something like credential stuffing are detecting it through the volume. But if you're a real person on a real device, then those techniques won't necessarily work against you. There's new account fraud. Again, we talked about, somebody steals your identity, you can go and just open up that new account. Synthetic identities is more around money laundering. If you want to move sums of money, you want established accounts that look like a real person that have been there for a while, that are going to be less likely to flag some of the fraud rules. Money laundering itself, how are you going to move money into and out of accounts under the current regulations of whatever region or nation state you're operating in? And then transaction fraud, both on the retail side and on the finance side. Fraudulent online activity allowing you to either take money out of an account or transfer money between accounts fraudulently. So these are some, just again, as we think about the business model, we have to track it back to what we're going to defend against, which will be the methods used to execute those business models. So what's coming up next? I'm not an innovative entrepreneur to know what's going to be the next raging success in cybercrime. But some of the things I find interesting, printers are changing the landscape for some of the physical things. You can print guns, you can print fingerprints. Based on the picture of a key, we've seen people be able to print the key. IoT devices are just exploding. Imagine if someone ransomware your car. How much would you pay to have your car so you can go to work today? Or your house? How much would you pay to have your online connected thermostat released so you could either heat or cool your house? How much would you pay to get your refrigerator working? And if I remember correctly, the insurance says if you lost power to your fridge, your average cost is around $600. So would you pay $100 just to get your refrigerator working again rather than lose everything in it? We see more and more devices to include things like TV sets coming with a camera and a microphone. What's going to happen as we start to have more and more of those compromised? Is somebody be able to make a business model around that? More and more big data. I have not seen as many data integrity attacks. So there may be more opportunities there. Target groups like law enforcement officers. Would the defense attorney pay some amount of money to have the historical record on the officer that made the arrest? We saw recent issues around people wearing fitness trackers and people being able to use those fitness trackers to determine where the military installations were. Another area I find fascinating is around the deep fakes and detecting the deep fakes, producing them, and then constantly repurposing technology. What are drones going to do to our physical security that we currently have? And what kind of compromises could we expect from there? So certainly not a holistic list, just some random thoughts on what could be coming down the pike. I'll be fascinated to hear from people about what they think might be coming. I do want to touch a little bit about why we should care. You know, the more we understand about these methods, the more the models make sense, the more we can help understand what we should be protecting against. And we also need to think through that of, is the cost or the impact different from losing a credit card than a gift card? I, as a customer, if my credit card is compromised, probably won't take that personally. If I have a gift card that I got from a loved one that I go to use and find out it's been drained, I may be more upset. That may be more of a brand hit than losing the credit card. So it's just something to think through. The financial loss, some of this ties back to the next one, legislation or litigation. Am I going to be fined, or is this going to end up in a class action lawsuit? What is the cost of recovery and remediation? This is across both infrastructure, people, the customer impacts that I've lost to that, and of course, while rare, the loss of life. Depending on where you live, there could be some impact to the leadership as well. We've seen CEOs fired, fined, and in rare cases, actually end up in jail around cyber-related activities. So I appreciate everybody's time. Again, from my trip to Alaska, you can see this is the second sign in a much more secure facility and same level of security with the password of 1234 to get into the airport.
Thanks, Steve. That was very, very interesting. And, you know, I think your last slide where you talk about deep fakes, to me, that's pretty much the scariest thing that's coming down the pike. So it'll be really interesting to see whether, we get, well, we're going to have to come up with solutions for it. And, that would be an interesting topic for another presentation. So we don't currently have any questions, but I wanted to ask if it's okay if people do come up with questions later, if they can reach out to you on either Slack or social media.
Yeah, I will do better about checking the Colorado Slack for the next couple weeks, and definitely happy to respond to people there. That'll work.
Okay, and really appreciate your time, and thank you to everyone who stayed and watched this presentation. It is recorded, so it will be available on our YouTube channel. And so be sure to check again on the ISSA Denver's event page. We do have an event next Tuesday and Thursday. In fact, next Tuesday is the chapter meeting. So thank you again, Steve, and everybody gets a little bit of time back in your day, and we look forward to seeing you at another event. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks again. Bye.
Bye.